He could look into your heart.
In many ways, he was really somebody who would edify and inspire us.
And especially his love for the society and his love for Jesus Christ.
Fr Nicolás had a great belief in the third eye. He wanted to have the capacity to look into a person. He said some people have developed that capacity of the third eye, and I think he had it because he could look into your heart. He could speak to you frankly and listen with humility, and yet I think that if he wasn't drawing something from the person he's speaking to, whoever they were, he would blame himself for not being able to see really what that person has to offer. Extraordinary capacity, of warmth, friendship, of vivacity, humor, a very infectious humor. He was an educator, an adult educator. He was an unlikely leader, actually. And I think some decisions were very difficult for him. Decisions about people, very difficult because he would feel he hasn't seen right into the depth of what that person is struggling with. And I remember when he was first made provincial, the provincial office had to be reshaped, rebuilt. And it was on the most valuable piece of land in Tokyo. So Father Nico was very distressed. How do we, committed to the poor, build an office in the richest part of the richest city in the world, So these dilemmas were terrible for him, really, how to make a decision like that. So the fact that he became the general was a shock to him, really a shock. He said to me with that very funny humor the night before the election, he said, I've never had so many people asking me about my health. And so I don't know what this means. So it was a terrible moment for him, but of course a moment of obedience where he had to do what was being asked of him by the society. And I've thought that it's such an irony that the person who is the most important leader in the society has to be the most obedient himself, just following what is asked of him. He was totally against Jesuit triumphalism. So a lot of the language about the Jesuits having the best education system or the best parish, he didn't like that at all. He said, a good Jesuit parish is a good parish. It just has to be a good parish so that we can help a diocese, we can help the parish priests, we can help model the things that they could do. This was his, no triumphalism, no boasting, really try to get to the heart of the matter. What attracted him about the Cambodian mission was that lay people had the leadership and religious had the leadership. So here were Jesuits working simply side by side, and this was his model of Jesuit work should be that the lay people are really acknowledged for their contribution. So Father Danny asked him a question. Is there a message you want to give to Father Sosa, to the new general? And he labored over this, and phrase by phrase came out. But it was quite funny because we got quite nervous as he was speaking, because he said, "There is nothing I can say for him to improve himself." He was like that, that his whole life had come down to this point where he had to speak directly from the heart. And he had this belief that if you are speaking impromptu and you speak from the heart, it's going to be true. And he had that capacity himself.
I think it was in 2005 when I first interacted with him, and at the time I was a tertian here in the Jacob Tertianship in Manila, and Father Nico was already a familiar sight on campus here at the Ateneo de Manila University because he was already the president of the conference. Fast forward 2012, the 70th procurators, congregation of procurators. And every night we would meet to evaluate the day, but at the same time to prepare for the following day. And of course, after a day's work, listening to talks and reflecting and sharing, I was obviously very tired during those evening meetings. But what amazed me was the energy of Father Nico at that time. He was still full of energies. He was full of ideas. 4 years after that, there was the General Congregation, and the Destato report, which he delivered in 2012, was still a very important document that we considered. In that report, he mentioned so many things. He was already concerned about some of the challenges of the society. Of course, there were some good news in the Status report. There were some new initiatives, but at the same time, he challenged us to greater depth, to try to be creative and to have that apostolic imagination, as we were preparing to celebrate the 200th year of the restoration of the society. So the following year, 2013, he appointed me as provincial, and I had very little interaction with him, but in the run-up to the congregation, 36th General Congregation, I was part of the Chaetus Praevius, the preparatory committee of that congregation, and then eventually became a member of the coordinating committee. And he was there initially as general, and he was also present at various moments in the Chaetus Praevius. And here again, I could see Father Nico, although there were already signs of diminishment, he was still a man of wisdom. His love for the society was so immense and so inspiring. And then the next moment was when he came here to the conference. He said he wanted to devote his time after being general, and the Provincial of Japan at the time missioned him to go to East Asian Pastoral Institute and Arupa International Residence. So, the other thing that really inspired me about Father Nico is that he did not have to be told to go to the infirmary. He knew his limits. He was not in any way pretentious. He knew that at some point he had to go to Japan and stay in the infirmary. But in the case of Father Nico, he didn't have to be told to go to the infirmary. He just offered himself and said that it's time. So we miss Father Nico. We miss his wisdom, his endearing presence, in many ways, he was really somebody who would edify and inspire us. We all know that he is now at peace in the Lord, and we hope that he continues to pray for and with us.
Father Nico was already at EAPI, coming here for about 3 days, spending 3 days a week here. And basically what he would do is see people for spiritual direction. But he was, obviously by staying here, he was also spending a lot of time just chatting with people, especially during meal times. And so when he was here, I also wanted to get the most of having Nico around, given his own experience as previous director and then of his very rich experience as JCAP president and then eventually as general. He spoke, with great affection for the ministry, the work of EAPI, and with great passion also for the church, for what EAPI can do, for the church. One of the best moments of life as member of the staff at EAPI is when we have our weekly prayer and dinner. And he would always be there, and that would always be a high point for all of us. But I think also for Nico, from what I can see, he seemed to also enjoy that. So there are two memories that I have that really show me the simplicity of Nico. One was that we wanted to raise funds for EAPI, so we wanted to use Nico, and we asked Nico for permission to name the endowment fund after him. So very clearly, I remember he said the same to me and the same to Father Tony Moreno. He said, I will give you permission only on the condition that there is no other name that you can use. You use it because you believe that it will be helpful for the fundraising effort. But the second one, which, so after about more than a year of having him around, over the months, his condition deteriorated. So before, he would live basically in Arupe, and then he would come to EAPI for those 3 days. So he would spend Thursday and Friday nights with us. And Thursday nights is when we have our dinner. So he would go by himself back to Arupe. But when his condition, his stability was deteriorating, and after he had had a few more falls, so we felt that it was important for us to drive him back. And so those brief moments of conversation in the car, driving him from EAPI to Arupe, were also very quiet, very simple. But what stands out is on several occasions, he told me, he said, if I am no longer useful, please let me know. I find it just so remarkable. Shows his detachment, his readiness to let other people who can contribute more to the mission to take on a greater role, self-effacing, and single-minded focus on the mission.
maybe 1 or 2 days before Father Nico's arrival back to Manila, and one evening Father Pops just called me. I was doing my dishwashing, and then Father Pops called me and asked me, can you be an assistant, or can you accompany Father Nico? And I just didn't know what to say. And in my mind, is he really serious? And people used to ask me, do we need any appointment? And well, I approached Father Nico and asked. Oh, Father Nico said, no, it's okay. He prefers like people coming in and just come out spontaneously and meet them instead of setting appointment and wait for them or wait for him. So he was just like very open to people, very welcoming to people, and very friendly person. He often smiles, he often laughs, and even sometimes he make jokes, and then before the joke is ended, he's already laughing. So it's such a lovely man. He's such a friendly and such an open person I have met. I would say very, very human, very down to earth attitude and behaviors. I remember those things, and I really feel, oh, that's what is meant to be who he is. He was just one of us in Arupe community, and he always wants to be just I would say just Nico, but not Adolfo Nicolás in a way. He addresses himself as Nico, and people, I myself also, I wasn't very used to with that name, but then he prefers that, and he said he always wants to be just one of us, just Nico, very simple man, where he is very natural in his behavior, in his speech, in his ways of doing things. So I learned so many things as well. That part of being a Jesuit inspires me a lot. That it's really a very good invitation to be simple and to be really with the people and to be really an obedient Jesuit. Father Nico belongs to Japan province, which means saying that Father Nico has to go back to Japan after his mission in the Philippines. So from that moment, he was very sure that he will be going back to Japan. He is a missionary to the Philippines province, and his missionary zeal, it's really truly inspiring and truly amazing.
As a Jesuit, was also a missionary to Asia. He spent about 40 years in Asia, and he fell in love with Asia. And I think that was the first connection that connected me with him when he came here in 2004. I arrived in API in 2003, so a year later he came here as president of JECAP. In and out, like a pigeon, coming home and flying out again. So short moments to get to know him. But when he was here, I enjoyed his presence always. Well, Nico, I can say now already, is a likable person. I cannot imagine that anybody dislikes the person. He's a captivating personality. And from the beginning, I felt that it clicked with him. Maybe also because he had that missionary heart. I know that Nico is several years older than I, but when he came here, he was still very spirited and very lively, although already marked by the beginning of the ailment that he suffered later. I knew that Nico was trained as a theologian, and I felt that also in what he said when he gave conferences. He was a very fine, well-trained theologian. Nico had a flexible mind, and he was very well aware of new developments in church and in mission. especially in Asia. At heart, he was a good theologian because he was not closed-minded. He was open to new ideas, and he was an investigator, alert to changes. In that time, he was always available to give conferences and talks to the participants here. And that was usually on sacraments, and especially liturgy. Wonderful conferences. How he taught the participants to celebrate the liturgy in a lively way, and how to put your heart in what you say and what you do, and in the gestures, the symbols. I felt the missionary there who had encountered people with other symbols and gestures in their religiosity. Immediately, I felt kind of what we call a kindred spirit, because maybe he was a missionary with another background, but a big heart for mission and the future of the church, and encountering other people of other faith convictions. That was his passion in Asia. And he has written and talked so many times about the challenge of mission in Asia. He was gentle, he was open to others, it was a pleasure to be in his company. He liked company. He had what we call in Spanish, don de gente, the gift for people. What I liked in Nico is his sense of humor. He was always telling jokes. And he showed that time and again, a sense of humor, a very fine humor. And even then, in that visit to the Generalate, I never forget, when I was about to leave, he said, Lucas, he called me Lucas. He said, Lucas, come. You know, at the entrance of the Generalate is a huge statue of Inigo, of St. Ignatius. I had seen it, of course, and said, you know who that is? That's your founder. Yes, he said. Look down, he said. There is the lemma of our Jesuit society. That I did not know. Ite inflammate omnia. Go and put the world on fire. That is what we are to do as Jesuits, he said. And then he said, Lucas, come with me. And he went behind the statue. And he said, look down there, he said. What had he placed there? A fire extinguisher. That's the humor of Nico. I have many good memories. I have not a single bad memory. Enjoyed his company, and I miss him a lot.
I first met Father Nico when I was a novice almost 40 years ago in 1980. I'm sure he doesn't remember anymore, but before we made the long retreat in November of 1980, he was still director of the East Asian Pastoral Institute, and he came to give us a series of talks on how to read the Gospel. I don't exactly remember what he said then, but I remember I was very impressed by the creativity, the insight, and I remember telling my companion, Father Victor Jesus, now that's a real theologian. After that, of course, I met Father Nico again when he was president of our conference, and then most recently for 8 years when he chose me to be his regional assistant for Asia Pacific and one of his general counselors. It's been a privilege, really, and a blessing to know Father Nico for me. And the best way I can summarize, in a sense, what I know of him and what I appreciate most about him, and there are many things I appreciate about Father Nico, is from an experience I had in 2009. Father Nico, at that time in Yogyakarta, had a very short time to meet the novices of the Indonesian province. But I can't forget what he said to the novices because it struck me very much. He said, I want to tell you only 3 things. First, God wants you to be happy Jesuits, because we're supposed to be servants of the good news, so we should be happy. Second, he said, if you want to be happy, you have to be free. Because he said, if your happiness depends on conditions, you'll be happy if you get this position, you'll be happy if you get this possession, then you'll never really be happy. Then the third thing he said was, you can only be free if you're centered on God and Jesus Christ. I remember hearing that in 2009, and I've never forgotten it, because it was very striking advice, very wise advice, but it also summarizes for me who Father Nico is. A very happy Jesuit. I can remember all his jokes, especially the one he told about the Catalan, stingy Catalan and his daughter. When he was elected as general in 2008, I remember he told the story of how it was a heavy thing, it was not something he wanted. But at a certain point he realized this was the last chance to give everything to God. And that's why he accepted with peace and with generosity.
During my time as a flying counselor, and were the exercises. At that time, Father Nicolás invited all the counselors to share the experience of the exercises together. And one of that moments, he asked me to direct the experience of the 8 days of exercises. And it was a very nice moment of sharing, because we were praying all day together, each one by himself, and in the night we used to share. And I used to also to talk with individually, personally, with Father Nicolás. It was really a special moment to understand and be touched by his deepest in his sense of this national spirituality, and especially his love for the society and his love for Jesus Christ. I received a very special gift in July 2019 when I have the opportunity to visit Adolfo Nicolás in Tokyo in the Jesuit infirmary. I spent with him more than an hour sharing my experience of being his successor as general, sharing with him my worries, my happiness, my good experiences, and he was very happy to hear and very in sympathy with what I was talking to him. And he was responding to me about his situation at that moment. And at the end, I asked him, please, Adolfo, benedict me, and he gave to me a very nice and warm benediction. I think I received that as a real benediction from the Lord through Adolfo for the Society of Jesus. Adolfo has given his life to us as society and to the world. So I ask the Lord we can have the grace he has had in his life.